Greetings, Dr. Mark Winton here from the Department of Criminal Justice at the University of Central Florida, and in this video I'd like to discuss genocide and theories. First, I'll mention that I've had a lot of trouble putting together this video, and I kept wondering why did I have so much problems, and I think a lot of that stemmed from realizing that there's a lot of theories explaining genocide on the one hand, but on the other hand, that I did not really find criminal justice theories readily applied directly to genocides. There's, of course, a few cases where that's done, but we will see that this field is really interdisciplinary. And in addition to criminal justice theories, we'll also find that we'll be using theories from political science, from anthropology, from sociology, from psychology, and so on. And so what I want you to think about is what theories you believe apply to genocides and how you would assess their strengths and weaknesses, how you would critically evaluate the use of that theory. And do we have a set of theories that explain all genocides, or do we have different theories that explain specific genocides? I think what I'm going to do in this video is just ask questions. I can tell you that when my co-author and I published our book on sex crimes, we looked at 12 theories that were used to explain sex offenders. And we organized that in three general categories, and they were: number one, the psychiatric medical psychopathology models; number two, the social psychological models; and number three, the sociocultural models. And if we look at the theories that we actually looked at, we had the medical, the sociobiological evolutionary, the psychoanalytic, the social learning, the intergenerational transmission, the exchange, symbolic interactionism, structural family systems theory, ecological theory, feminist and conflict theory, anomie and strain theory, and cultural spillover theory. And what I started to do is to use those theories, and I found that it didn't really work that well. So I'm not going to try to apply all those theories to genocides. But I will mention some questions and ask you if you think some of these theories might be helpful. For example, does the medical model help us at all in understanding genocide? Looking at brain structures, neurotransmitters, genetic factors, and so forth, and how people function and run into dysfunctional behavior when under undue stress, and so forth. Again, we find that we start talking about a real micro individual based as opposed to group. And so I have a case study where I analyze an individual who committed 70 murders during a genocide. He was a participant in the genocide, and he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder after the genocide had stopped, and he was in his trial. I mean, how do we make sense of that? Do we apply the medical model to that individual? Certainly not to an entire group. And how does the sociobiological or evolutionary theory explain genocide? Looking at the interaction of biological and environmental factors and adaptive measures that groups use for survival that have gone terribly wrong. What about the psychoanalytic model, Freud's model, and the modern day versions of that? I think certainly that we see the concept of trauma when we discuss genocides certainly among the survivors, but also we could look at perpetrators as well. Is there community trauma, social trauma, if you will? And then the personality of perpetrators. And this is based off of Dr. Kressel's work from his book Mass Hate, published in 2002, where he discusses the authoritarian personality, someone who likes to dominate subordinates but defer to superiors, who projects onto others, kind of like the psychoanalytic model here, and may be very obedient in their role. That these are that they follow the leader and do whatever the leader says. How does that fit into play? Looking at that situation. And then social learning. How do people learn to become genocide participants? How are they rewarded and punished for their participation or lack of participation in the genocides? How do they rationalize or make sense of their violent, criminal, destructive behavior? Back to Kressel in 2002 in his book Mass Hate, he reviewed the Milgram studies and asked about the power of the situation, and talks about Milgram's study where he encouraged participants to give a shock to people if they made errors on a test, and even though they weren't really getting shocked, you had people shocking thinking they were shocking these people when they got the answers wrong, and this appeared not to be aggression but more obedience. So that kind of fits in as well, looking at Kressel's earlier work we just talked about. Also, what's discussed in the terms of the power of the situation is Zimbardo, Dr. Zimbardo's mock prison studies, and how the prison guards in that mock prison study became desensitized and started rewarding each other for violent behavior toward the prisoners. And then what about symbolic interactionism? Here is a focus on social interaction, the self, role-taking, meaning of symbols, labeling. How does that help us understand genocides? Dr. Porter, in 1999, presents a model of predicting genocides and looks at a variety of more macro level variables. For example, minority groups placed outside the universe of moral obligation. And we're going to see that in a lot of the other theories as well in discussions. Minority groups placed outside the universe of moral obligation. Embedded racial and biological ideologies, exclusionary politics, territorial ambitions, state power reduced by war, retaliation is at a minimum, and also economic conditions. And this is from Genocide is a New Word for an Old Crime, toward a social scientific study of the Holocaust and other international crimes. And this is in Porter and Hoffman's edited The Sociology of the Holocaust and Genocide, published by the American Sociological Association. A great resource that I've used in my courses throughout the years. Dr. Helen Fine talks about predisposing and facilitating conditions, and I'll name several here. Victims defined outside the universe of obligation. So there's the us and the them. That there's groups that are defined as outsiders, as not human, as dangerous. Also, state power is reduced by war or conflict. Also, those who are in control use a political formula to justify their domination. And so we can look at those factors as well. And those are obviously more macro level or societal level factors. So we begin to see there's really a lot of theories that we could use. And one of the things I want you to always be thinking about is, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses? Always be critically evaluating if that theory works or not. And I just mentioned a few, and I tried not to say this one works, this one doesn't. I want you to think about that. But I did try to just ask the questions, are these theories, ones that you would consider using to explain genocide? Which of these theories would you, or are there other theories? And finally, as I wrap up this video, I will let you know now that later on I'll present my own approach to understanding genocide. And I use an existing theory from sociology and criminal justice and criminology to apply to genocide, which is a situation that very few have done with that particular theory. And I've done that for many years, and I've expanded my research, and there's been a few minor modifications, but that's the theory that I use and I have used for a number of years now and will continue to use. And when I present that, I will also mention that this is not the only theory, this is not the best theory, this is one that your instructor uses, and the reason I'm talking about that one more than others is because I have more knowledge about it, that I use it, I understand it more. And of course I have a bias, thinking that one works better than some of the others. And I tell you that's a bias. The best thing you can do is evaluate it and challenge that and see where it works and where it doesn't. The theory became stronger when I presented at conferences and I was critiqued by my colleagues who actually helped me by providing that constructive feedback. And so that always is helpful as well, because we're all working together trying to figure out how we can prevent genocides from occurring. And I'll go ahead and I'll wrap up this video here. Thank you.